Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box.
Hey, Sam. Thank you for being here today. Super excited to jump in and talk about your career journey and Muzie. And gosh, it feels like a wild ride. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about how this all came to exist.
Yeah.
Why don't we kind of start in the beginning, if that's okay, right away? Tell me a little bit about your musical background. When did you start playing an instrument?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. I started, I would think actually kind of late in the game. I'm still a kid, but I was about 13 when I got my
Okay.
first instrument. So for a lot of kids, they're 5, 6, 7, they're just getting instruments and going. I think the reason that I started late was my dad was a professional drummer in the 80s. So in the house, we had a drum set always in the basement. And I just didn't really gravitate towards the drums. So I just didn't play. And it was probably my sister took piano lessons and things like that. And it just never really clicked. And I think probably like 10 to 13, I started seeing my dad playing a lot in the basement and playing along to like these backing tracks and songs and all that. And thinking like, okay, that's actually kind of neat. Like, I wonder how I could get involved. And then finally it was, okay, I'll get a guitar because that's the other side, right? So I remember for my 13th birthday, we went to Guitar Center, picked out the guitar and everything. And my dad, being a musician, was like, okay, we're not getting like the starter pack. Like, we got to get something that's like good that you're actually going to grow with. And which I think was a good move in the end because it stuck. So, but that was
a wise investment early on. Yeah.
And I still have that guitar, so definitely a good call.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh.
But it's like that was sort of for me. We got the guitar home, and it was actually kind of funny because we went like a week before my birthday, so he wouldn't let me use the guitar. So that started building this like anticipation to like the birthday. And I remember the day of my birthday, I sat down, I played for 30 minutes, just playing like C, G, and D back and forth, and that was it. It was that 30-minute session, and I was like, all right, this is me. I was like, I found it. And literally from that day forward, I never put down the thing. I think
that's awesome.
Yeah, and the cool thing too is having a dad who was a drummer. For me, I got spoiled because my dad also worked from home. So every single day after school, 2:30, I get off the bus. My dad's at home. He goes into the basement. I go into the basement, and we have a hour-long jam session.
My God.
Every day.
That is so fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure he was so excited too that you did show an interest at that point that he's like, anything you want, like we'll play anytime.
Yeah, it got out of hand very quick. My mom will be the one to attest to the bills that probably started rolling in from Guitar Center and all the other, But it was our thing, and the kid across the street also started learning drums too. So I sort of like had like a little band with him, and then of course I was like playing with my dad every night. So I was very comfortable playing with other musicians right off the bat. So that was a really cool thing just as a kid. And then through high school and everything, I just kept playing. For my 16th birthday, we basically turned the basement into a recording studio. And it's just him vicariously using me as an excuse to go and do. I was
going to say, I don't think you were the only one that benefited from that change.
Exactly.
That small project.
Right. So, it was, and like I said, I was spoiled on that front. Like, it was a very, very lucky opportunity for me. And because of that, I was able to actually start recording. So when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be like a producer or something, because I recorded probably like 10 of my friends' bands in the high school, all different, like rap, metal, country, folk, like anything they wanted to record, they would come over and I'd play engineer and like, try to
a little side gig. Yeah.
And so when I went off to college, I went to Berkeley, and my assumption was play in a band and become a producer. And for the first 2 years, that is what I pursued. And my band did decently well for being a college band. We're an instrumental heavy metal band, so we are like niche of niche. But we got some really cool opportunities, some offers on record contracts, things like that. But it was all just too good to be true. And so that fell apart pretty quick. And so probably 2 years of all the fun, and then within a week it was gone. And then I was a little left scrambling, trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do now.
Yeah.
It's like I had thought for literally from the age of 13 to the age of 20 that I was going to be playing and being a producer or something. And so the next year of college was kind of a mess. I actually took a semester off and just sort of tried figuring out what to do. And then I went back and I did film scoring for a semester, and I
Oh, cool.
hated it.
Oh, never
I
mind.
thought I thought it was, I know I thought I was going to love it because I enjoyed composing and everything, and it was a really cool major, but I just couldn't do it. It's I'm just not that good at composing, and I had friends who one of my friends went off to go work for Disney, and like so I was like comparing my work to theirs, and I was like, nope, I'm not on the same level at all. It's like
Well,
so
that's a hard go too, because if you're coming back into it later, I mean,
yep.
obviously, like some of these people had a couple extra years on you and that focus. It's really hard if you're playing that comparison game then to decide
Absolutely.
like this
Yeah.
is where I'm going to go. Oof, yeah,
100%. And you're already comparing yourself to some of the best in the world. So
yeah.
and so I really fell into that sort of like, what the hell do I do now? Like, and finally I kind of figured out my other favorite thing is technology. I've always been
Mm.
interested in writing software. I never did learn how to code eventually, but always been interested in how software works and all that kind of stuff. And at college, there was this pretty unique opportunity where you could essentially build your own major. And at that point, I was sort of like, didn't really have a choice. I kind of had to do that because I had done so many random things through the last like 2.5 years. I was like, all right, I need to solidify this into something
It's
that
a
makes
it's a
sense.
Bachelor of Arts and Sam's favorite things, right?
Pretty much. So at a certain point, you're like, all right, this has to have a focus. And so for me, education technology sort of just fell into the spot. And it
Mm,
was really because of the classes that were being offered. I had
that's
opportunities
cool.
to take some technology classes, some education classes, and then there was this really unique class that they were doing, which was half of the class was MIT and half was Berkeley. So one professor from MIT, one professor from Berkeley, and the idea was to build startups. And so it was the startup incubator idea. And so we were like, I think the first or second cohort to go through this program.
Okay.
But I was the only person to actually produce a product by the end of the class. So fortunately, again, my dad, after being a musician, was a software developer. So we
Helps.
just went right back to our old ways of of jamming on the
Oh, that's
afternoons. This
awesome.
time, put down the drums and picked up the laptops. And basically, from middle of college to the end of college, I was working with my dad hand in hand to develop these practice apps for college students.
That's really
And
cool.
essentially, the idea was you would, if you ever done like a proficiency test, they always have like 50 different things you have to have. It's like these scales and these keys, these
Yeah.
chords, these, and it's just so many things that I was getting so overwhelmed with that plus all my other curriculum. The idea with the original app was to basically have somewhere you could say, I need to get all this stuff done by a certain date. And then it
Mm.
would retroactively build a practice routine for you. So you had like a guided program to follow through. It was a pretty cool concept, and it was fun to mess around with. And fortunately, Berkeley were the first customers of it. They Because we were basically the only products that came out of their incubator. So I think they probably
They
felt
had some buy-in early
yeah, I
on,
think they
yeah.
felt like they might need to sort of like swoop that up and
Yeah.
sort of give it a little push. And so that was a big help for us. We got a ton of experience from actually working with the college and getting ideas on how it would work at scale, things
Oh,
like that.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
for 4 years or so, we ran that business, and it didn't go where we wanted it to go. It's the first of a few fails. And it was, really 4 years was too long. About 2 years
Mm.
in, we probably should have pulled the plug because it just kind of kept spiraling. The practice app became a lesson management thing that became a scheduling tool, that became a billing tool, that basically it was a My Music Staff competitor by the end of it.
Mm.
And that was never where we were going with it, but it just sort of went that way.
Well,
And
isn't it interesting? That's something that I think all entrepreneurs deal with, especially musicians. Like you listed in school all of the different things that you are doing and trying and working on.
yep.
How after school then do you narrow that list down again? Like how do you get your brain to stop saying like I'm in ensembles and chamber and my lessons and another band and I'm playing all my friends' compositions? Like how do you pare down that list again and focus? That's a real issue that we apply to our lives ongoing.
100%, absolutely. And fortunately, as we kind of got to the point with the product we started seeing that it just wasn't latching in the way we wanted it to.
Yeah.
So because it was still me and my dad in charge of everything, we just started brainstorming other ideas. Like, well, what else can we do? This
Yeah.
is doing well enough that we can just let it kind of go and then
Exist. Yeah.
build something else. And when we're ready, we'll shut that one down, move everyone over. And basically, that's sort of what happened, except the second thing we built never even got released. So, the journey is long. So we built this app that was basically like you play and it would listen to you play and give feedback on your performance. At the time, microphones and cameras and stuff on your phones were not really good enough
Yeah.
to do that. Nowadays, there's tons of like note flights and things like that do it great. But that was sort of the concept we'd been working with. So for another year or so, we built out that one, and that didn't really go anywhere. And so I did end up taking like a sales job at a software company just to pay the bills. And then
and you learn the ins and out a little bit. That's not the end of the world too, right? Get some experience there.
Actually, something was kind of funny. The first job I took was very much like a cold call center. You're just like sitting calling all day. But the second job, like 2 months later, there was an opportunity to do sales for a tutoring company. And so that I was like, ooh, I want to work there.
Yeah.
So I went and worked for them for a year. And that actually was a massive amount of learning because it was all public school tutoring. So all I did all day was call school principals. So I got very good at talking to teachers again. And then it started like kicking back the whole like, well, yeah, I want to work with teachers again. Like this is me. This is my world. And so we started building Muzie. It was 2019-ish when we started working on it. And then it's obviously we launched it January 10th, 2020. And within a few weeks, every single person was online. So that was just lucky timing. But fortunately for us, the concept for Muzie was actually slightly different than what it is now. We were trying to do this sort of on-demand marketplace where students would go onto the platform. They'd say, hey, I need a lesson on this topic. And it would immediately connect you with a teacher. It wouldn't send you to a calendar.
People are like logged in, sitting on their computer, ready to go. Okay.
Yeah, real live teachers right then and there. And it would be pay by the minute. So the student had full control over the session. So they were able to just close down the session whenever they wanted. And so that was a great way of sort of giving control to the student, where a lot of the marketplaces just were sort of the flip thing. Unfortunately, that lasted about 2 weeks because all of the teachers we had on there loved it for the first week or so. But as soon as they had to start all teaching online, it was very much, okay, this is cool, but we need our students now.
Well, yeah, what a pivot too. I mean, we had talked about this previously, but to be in a position where everyone else is freaking out, especially on the teacher side of thing, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What do we do with our students? You guys had inadvertently prepared yourself perfectly for this exact situation. When things were coming down the pipeline, like in January or February of that year, did you have any idea that you might need to make that pivot, or did it just kind of feel like, that's that thing happening in the distance, Yeah,
it was probably like the second week in February when we had like a couple hundred teachers on the platform, and almost every single one of them was asking for the same thing. So we're sitting there going, well, this is literally the opposite of what we've just been working on for the last year and a half. And I basically had to convince my team that everything I had just told you is wrong, and that the year and a half we just spent building out this technology is great, but we need to pivot now. And it was one of those things where I think there was enough news starting to brew that everyone was like, okay, this is different.
This makes sense, yeah.
And because we're quite a lean company, at the time it was still just me and my dad really doing most of the work. So it was very much just a conversation to say, okay, we got to do this. And there's another guy in the company too at the time, and he was the one who was like, we really need to do this.
Yeah.
And so we're like, let's just do it. So we pulled the plug on the whole marketplace thing and swapped it over to bring your own students. And then it was basically a race because we had built a bunch of tools, but it was like, okay, every request was, I need this, I need that, I need this. And it was basically like, okay, like that was the stuff we had put on the roadmap for the next 18 months needed to be condensed down to 3 months. And we did most of it and we got a ton of things out, but it was very much a learning curve on, you pivot and move quick. And
Well,
if
when
we,
you're that agile too, like, man, I
yeah,
think sometimes like having those deadlines helps to get the things done faster. Like, I'm sure it was wild in your schedule. You guys are probably not getting a whole lot of sleep or like eating or anything like that, but you're getting the work done in a way that now, I mean, gosh, 2.5 years later, we're looking back on it and thinking like, oh,
yeah,
thank goodness that we've got this platform and we
yeah,
got everything figured out in time, saved us all this other energy and time.
yeah.
Ugh.
And you never know. I mean, it's a gamble.
Yeah.
You have no idea if it's going to work. You
Yeah.
spend a year and a half honing your skills on something, and then you're in a weekend flipping it on its head
Mm,
and just hoping that what you've done is right, and that
yeah.
you didn't just destroy the thing you spent all year
Yeah.
working on. And fortunately, we were right. It was, the pandemic obviously was much worse and much more severe than anyone had initially
Yeah.
thought. So it lasted longer than we thought it would. It
Mhm.
hit more people than we thought it would. So for us, the growth was unexpected entirely. And so that, and still for most of that time, it was still just me and my dad. Because, we're growing quick, but we're still just trying to play catch up.
Yeah.
So we really didn't have time to like fold people into the business and train them.
Or
And
yeah. Like, how are you going to onboard them entirely when you're trying to like you're coding for 20 out of a 24-hour day?
literally. And so, and I was redesigning every feature that I had previously designed. And so, I'm sending these design schemes over to my dad. He's trying to whip up the code for it and send it back. We're testing
Mhm.
it. We're using it with our teachers and trialing it. It was chaos, honestly.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, now I look back and it's kind of like a fond memory because it was so fun. Like it was so much fun to have this ridiculous challenge just thrown on our laps. After 4 years of very much cricket, it was,
Mm.
we had run that other product for a long time, and we actually sunset it January 2020. Like it was literally a
Mm.
flip switch kind of thing. So we shut down the old program and rolled in the new one. And then it was changed the new one to the newer new one, and then it
2.0.
continued. I mean,
Yeah.
not even a year later, half the teachers were like, "All right, we're going back to in person." So we're like, "Okay, we need to build in person tools again." And
Mm.
so we started going back through that route. And so there's a lot of like back and forth, back and forth. Now it's much more of a stable. We kind of have a good idea of what the industry is going to look like for the next 10 years. And I think we kind of got our hold there. But yeah, it was a bit of a mess to get to where you needed to get to.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like I joked at the beginning, a wild ride, and I know you'd kind of given me the short version of that a few weeks ago, but that's just shocking. Okay, so I wanna jump back to the beginning. I have
Yeah.
so many questions because I feel like
No,
this is just mind blowing. First question, when you were in high school and you're
yeah.
looking at going into school and you had mentioned that you were interested in technology. So I'm sure that's what was influencing some of the production kind of
Yeah, definitely.
ideas too. Okay. Um, had you shown any interest in that point at doing any kind of software design? Like, had you built out anything or like, I don't know, I'm imagining jerry-rigged machinery in the basement recording studio to do what you'd wanted.
That's probably the closest. I've always been a tinkerer, so I've
Mm,
always been messing around with things. But I never got actually good at software development or anything because I was ended up always being pushed to the design
mm,
side of things.
sure.
So as much as I would have loved to have actually become a competent coder, it just didn't land. But yeah, like in high school, I took like the website development course, and I actually remember for some reason I wasn't in the class for the first like month or something. I must
Hmm.
have had like a different class and then changed it. I can't quite remember, but I remember just playing catch up the whole time. And by the end, I was like, "Oh, I can make websites now!" like, and so and that had always interested me. I used to build robots when I was a kid.
Oh,
I was on two robotics teams as a
that's
child.
awesome.
So that stuff had always just been in the world of
Huh.
my life. And my dad being a software engineer, there was always 5 computer screens in the house. We were the tech family. So like when the first iPhone came out, my dad ran to
Oh yeah,
Apple.
early adopter for sure.
Yeah, I was like 12 and I had a brand new iPhone, and it's like I had no idea what to do with this thing. It's like, but my dad just loved the tech, so
That's
that was
awesome.
very much involved in the house. And then yeah, I just was the producing side of things. I loved playing with like the software, and I like
Mm,
all the reverb, EQ, and all the compression, everything,
yeah.
and that was always fun to tinker with.
Mm,
And then when I find, but I guess as the band started to fall apart and I started to see the reality of how hard it really is to become a producer and what skill
Yeah.
sets are actually needed, it started to push me just away. And by then I was like, I just don't want to do it as a job.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that still as a thing I can enjoy.
Well, it's interesting too, because obviously you're not afraid of a challenge.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I think, I think I don't know. For a lot of us, what draws us to music is not like you can't do other things. You don't have other interests,
yeah.
right? I'm sure you talk to musicians like this all the time that are like, yeah, my other thought if I wasn't gonna be a musician is I was gonna be a doctor or a lawyer or like the list is like these very, kind of brainiac things.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's kind of that common thread is like a lot of musicians are not afraid of a challenge. We're
Yeah.
constantly stretching ourselves and learning repertoire and taking things on that are outside of our comfort zone or knowledge base. So it's not surprising to see a musician, kind of follow this path, but it's also so fun to hear how you've taken those two passions and kind of like married them together to make this
Yeah.
incredible
Yeah. No, they
situation for
really are.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unintentionally, and I still work with my dad,
Yeah.
and and literally from 13 years old with the guitars in the basement to 30, and
That's
running a
so
software
cool.
company. It's like we've still just, it's not just the two of, but like it's still the two of us that make all the final decisions and determine what the future is for the business and all that stuff. And it's odd, definitely. There's definitely days where I'm like, this is surreal still, because like I never really thought that it would work. I mean, I always assumed it had to because it had to, but there's always this thing in the back of your head like, this isn't going to work. This is crazy. Like, what are we doing? And then when you see it actually start to work, you're like, oh, okay, like people are signing up. They do like
Mm.
this. We are doing the right thing. Like, and it's very imposter syndrome. Like I still feel that a lot.
Mm. Do you think that some of that imposter syndrome comes from the fact that you're a musician only like working tangentially in music, or do you feel like some of it's just like, again, I'm just doing things I've never done before and that's where a lot of that's coming from in general, regardless of my identity previously being a musician?
Yeah, oh, definitely the musician part, because I
Mm.
grew up thinking I was going to be a guitar player or a producer, and then and teaching was always kind of like the backup plan, I guess. At the time, I was like, no, I'm not going to teach. Why would I teach? I can do all these other great things. And then the minute you start teaching, you're like, oh, it's not a backup plan at all. You're like, I actually enjoyed this way more than I was enjoying sitting in dive bars on Friday nights waiting to go on stage. Like,
Fair enough.
So at a certain point you're like, the quality of life I can have doing this is much more what I actually want than what I
Mm.
thought I wanted. And it is a weird road, because you do go down so many paths thinking you're going to do this, you think you're going to do this. Even with the software, I thought the first thing was going to be the business, then I thought the second thing was going to be the business, then I thought the original Muzie was going to be the business, and now I kind of have an idea of what the business is, but only 4 years into it.
Mm.
It's
Our careers are never okay. I was doing a presentation yesterday at Miami University and we were talking about networking, career development. And I put on one of my slides, like, well, I asked a couple times, like, what do you guys do? You feel confident? Like, do you know what you want to do with your life? And like, I would say like 75% of them gave me a little thumbs up. And we dig into that a little bit more. I'm like 100%, you actually know what you want to do. And all of a sudden, like the little fingers start dropping. Like, well, I think I might be a performer. And we all kind of know that when we're in school, but also there's this mindset of like, I'm in school to do this thing, so of course I'm going to do the thing.
yeah,
I'm going for performance, of course I'm going to be a performer. I'm going for producing, of course I'm going to be a production. Working
yep,
in production long term, like that's obviously what's going to happen. And then you get into the real world, and it's not that the real world like takes it away from you. It's just that there's so
yeah.
many other opportunities that you didn't see.
Yeah, that I like how you phrase that, because I feel like people think that it's
Mm,
being taken away from you,
yeah.
and that's not really true. You're the one deciding at the end of the day. Like, I put down the guitar. Like,
Mm,
that was my choice one day. It was not something I was happy about. I was very
yeah.
begrudging to put it down. And I actually put the guitar down and did not touch it for almost 2 years.
Mm,
Like, literally, I just had to stop. And because it was, and I'd teach a bit on the sides and stuff, but I did not play it for any enjoyment purposes at all, because it had just been sucked out of me.
Yeah.
And I was so focused on being that famous rock star that, by the time that dream was truly crushed, that you were like, oh yeah. But you have to look back and go, I made these decisions along the way to do these other things. And if I could have just never put down my guitar and kept going down that road, and who knows, I very well could have done it or not. I don't know. But I'm very glad I went this way because I do enjoy what I do now. But it's so weird because the skill sets that I use are nothing that I was trained on.
None of the degree programming trained you for this. Yeah.
No offense to Berkeley, but
Great school. We're not saying anything negative.
It's like great school, great teachers, great network. But at the end of the day, I probably would have been better going to like a normal school with a tech program and a design program, because literally my day to day is like using Photoshop to design software. And so like I actually build the entire product in like series of images so that the dev team has an idea of literally what it's going to look like, not
so
just
cool.
a schematic or something. So that's sort of weird skill set that I've kind of taken on. And that's sort of my thing now, is I'm a software designer, I guess. Which,
okay, like, we can look back and say like, oh, I probably would have been better off. But also, what musicians are looking for in the software. Like, you are a musician. You have been a teacher for several years. You know what the priorities are. And of course you ask, do market research and things, but having that personal preference of, gosh, if I was the one in the classroom, it would make a lot more sense for this button to be here, has to help make the product better.
100%. It's vital that the team behind the product is part of the industry, because it's even like my dad's experience as a professional drummer. Yeah, it's 40 years ago now, but that is instrumental to him being able to understand what it is I'm saying. And it is, I'm fortunate that I actually take lessons on Muzie as a student, from a piano teacher. So I take piano lessons and I teach guitar lessons on the platform. So I get to literally use the platform in all normal capacities as a user. And then I'm over here on the side being like, we should move that over there, and that should be there, and this should go over here. And it is now very much our teachers that drive it. There's thousands of them and one of me. So, their ideas usually usurp my ideas now. But I like that because it's also showing me all the different ways to teach and all the different things that I never would have incorporated into my own teaching. And now I teach way more than I did, but like in college when I kind of gave up the guitar for those 2 years. Once I finally got back, I hit the ground running again, and I love teaching ever since. And like I make sure that I have time to teach, even though Muzie takes up 99% of my time. It's like answering like chat support while I'm teaching isn't the best, but it's like you got to do what you got to do. So, but my students get it too. They've all been with me for a while now, and I think that for them it's kind of cool too. Like they've got to, and they all have a personal input. Like there's literal features I could point to in the product that I could be like, oh, this student is the reason for that thing, and this student's the reason for that thing. So it's really neat.
That's awesome. Well, and I think what's so cool about your journey and your story is that you are working so closely with your family the entire time. One thing I was thinking about as you're talking about like the benefits of your dad's experience and what you guys have built now is there's so many online lesson platforms. Like if we're thinking about like Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and things, like all the things that people tend to initially gravitate towards. None of those were made for musicians. So the sound quality on them is disastrous at best. Like there are some platforms, and we are not going to be slanderous on this podcast, but I have had lessons recently online where I'm like, how is it getting worse? Like every update that gets made, the audio quality declines for music. I don't understand. I can't hear the whole upper range of the clarinet. Anyway, but when you're in those situations, it's frustrating. So having someone, gosh, especially as a drummer, like we are pushing the limit of any kind of audio input. He knows what that looks like.
It's fucking drums. It's like if those can get through nicely, then your piccolo and your cello and your violin and your guitars are going to sound great.
Oh, that's hilarious.
If you get cymbals to sound good through a computer, then you've figured out most of the problems.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and like I was saying, it's being part of the industry, right? It's like because we were musicians, are technology specialists as well, And so there's that weird blend that,
Mm.
the company, they always like, investors are always looking for the why you, like, why is your team the team that should be doing the thing? And in our case, it's just this weird combination of skills that we happen to have. It's like, I happen to have a very good understanding of education technology and the ability to design software. My dad just happens to be a very, very high level software developer and have the experience of being a professional musician. So it's like, that's a match made in heaven. And
Yeah.
we've been working together for so long that it's, to us, it's like, it's not even work in a way. Like, we
Mm.
don't think of it like, it's not like work mode and family mode. It very much blends back and forth, but that's kind of how we are anyway. So it works really well for us.
Yeah, you're at the Sunday night dinner table and you're like, "Hey, by the way, I had this idea."
Oh,
Or like, "This
yeah,
thing
like,
just popped in my head."
my mom and sisters hate it, but like, because we will literally start talking about something, and then all of a sudden we're diverting down this path, and then we're like, oh, what about? Oh, hold on, and then we'll literally walk into the other room, start doing something, and then come back. But for us, like, we've always been like that. Like, if it
Yeah.
wasn't this, we would have been doing the same thing with music or something else, or like little random projects. It's just kind of how we've always been. So to make it a business is really fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a dream, honestly. It's
yeah,
not everyone's dream. I think that's something that you have to be
sure.
kind of clear about too. Like, not everyone wants to work with family. I get it. Like, we get plenty of comments about like, "Oh my God, you work with your spouse full time." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's always been our thing. Like, we've wanted that." And in that relationship, I think it's important that you have those boundaries that you're comfortable with
Yeah,
and excited about. So I'm glad that you guys have this like long-term working relationship that seems like it's just so
yeah.
clear and succinct. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's
That's
easier
amazing.
too because we've literally known each other forever. So we have
Since you've
yeah, right.
existed, yeah.
So we have like a way of communicating where we hardly even have to say anything, and
Mm,
things can get done at a much faster pace than if you have a huge team that you've got to explain everything to every single
yeah.
time. The
Yeah.
trick is always trying to fold in new people into the team. That whole onboarding process is very much a learning curve for me.
Yeah.
In the early days of trying to be like, okay, this is how we've been doing everything forever, but that doesn't actually make perfect sense when you start adding more people to your thing,
Yeah.
and you've got to change it. But that's part of the fun too. Is that's the next stage of the learning is how to keep building as a business. And for me, it's taking on the proper CEO role, or
Mm.
whatever you call it. That's the one that always gets me. It's like, I don't feel CEO is the right title for what we do. It's we're the co-founders and the people who are in charge. But it's like CEO just feels too grand or
Yeah.
something. But,
We're too corporate. Yeah,
yeah.
we're still playing drums in the basement together,
Yeah,
having
exactly.
a beer.
Yeah, it's like, so, if we were to ever actually have a physical office, I'm sure there'd be a band practice room in the office. It's like,
Oh, that's awesome.
that's the,
Oh, that's awesome. So when you guys, I want to like pivot back to product number one. So you get out of school and you've got this product that already is in development. It's already, existing and everything because you made it while you were at Berkeley. Was the vision at that point coming out of school clear? Like, I want this to be the full time, or were you still like, this is a project and I'm open to like, I still might want a gig. I still might want to do other things. What were you thinking at that point?
that was definitely the point where the guitar was down and
Okay.
that I was no interested in touching it at all.
Mm,
I didn't really even want to work in music that much anymore, but we'd already done all this work, and I a degree from Berkeley, so I'm like, well, kind of have to go
I
this way,
guess
I think.
I'm stuck here.
So
Yeah.
so we sort of just kept running it, and we did a lot of in those days it was very much like the startup era, 2015 2016, when every company was getting their like $1 billion investment so we were doing a lot of like incubator pitches and things like that. And I think that kind of drained me a bit because we just
Mm,
weren't the right company for that kind of thing. We don't need $50 million invested into us. That's not right for this industry. And so it felt a little bit like people were like, no, no, no. And it's like, man, that's a lot of no's,
mm,
But it was one of those things where I was like, we're just looking in the wrong place. And it wasn't until we actually put that product to bed and started really working on Muzie that I started to really understand that, and that we were just looking in the wrong place for a really long time. And then we started looking in the right place, and that sort of
took
solved the
off.
problem. Yeah. And so, that was a learning curve that I almost frustrates you because you look back and like, man, I feel like I wasted so much time back then, like just kind of poking at random things to see what would happen. And then, yeah, it just sort of clicked eventually. But I think that's also just a product of doing it for so many years that eventually it has to click.
You land. Yeah. You invest enough energy, it's going to come back at some point, right? Karma,
Right.
whatever. It's got to circle back. Do you feel that we should normalize the whole putting the instrument down thing? Because I certainly got to that point, like right around the beginning of COVID, I was having really bad TMJ issues. I was still teaching the whole time, of course, but I wasn't playing as much. I look back at that and I'm glad. I think I needed a little bit of that separation too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's something that you wish more musicians like were given permission to do?
Or would admit that they do. So, because
Fair
I think
enough.
it's one of
Yeah.
those things where it at the time I felt like a loser, honestly, because
Mm.
I felt like I failed at all the goals I had set myself.
Yeah.
And I had these like 2 years in the first 2 years of college that went really well for me, that felt like I was on this perpetual train of that life was really gonna like take off. Like the reason I'd taken that semester off was we actually were going on a tour, and we were going to tour for the entire semester, and the band fell apart a few weeks before the semester started. So I literally just ended up stuck. And so that, and I'm glad that happened though. Like that month or 3 months off of school, while all my friends were still going to school, I still lived right there. Like I was still in the bubble. Like I didn't move or anything. So I was still living with my roommates, all going to class. I was just going to work. So, and then I was like, I hate going to work. I want to go back to class. So that I think helped. But taking those times off, I think, was crucial. If I had just pushed myself straight back into school, I never would have found the entrepreneurship department. I would never have found those startup labs. I would have just gone right back to the production major because that's what I had the most credits in. And then I would have just followed that to the end. And I would have been pretty miserable. And because I just know that's not me. So, in the hindsight, I am glad. And even with my putting it down for a few years after the fact, when I finally picked up the guitar again, we actually wrote an album the year that I picked my guitar back up. The old band kind of got back together for a week, and it was me, the guitar player, and then we kind of filled in the rest of the band with new guys. But that was sort of like okay, like I still got it, like I can still do this, and that kind of helped me feel like okay. But it was also a nice nail in the coffin for the band because it was a final
chapter closed.
Yeah. And it's actually funny, we're just recently started talking again because it's the 10th anniversary of the first album. And so we're thinking maybe we'll go and do something, but not under the same name, not under the same brand, just a little fun side project, just for the enjoyment of writing some tunes. Probably not even, maybe do it anonymous even, so it's one of those things where we can just do it and not have to feel like it needs to be comparable to the thing we did before.
Yeah.
But I think it's important because if you just drive yourself down the hole and you just keep driving yourself down the hole, you're not going to climb back out. And, if it means putting the guitar down for a bit or it means changing career paths for a bit, I was working in those software companies for a year and a half or so where I basically my all day, every day was that. And I was doing a little bit of, my company stuff on the side, but it got really pushed down to like an hour in the evenings, But I almost think that I needed that, I needed to go learn from these other divisions. I needed to go and learn how to sell. I'd never done a single sales thing in my life. It's like I sold pizza. That's not hard, It's like
they're all coming to you. You don't even have to.
It's like where now I'm cold.
You want ranch on the side of that? Like what's the upsell?
That was, and then I was an Uber Lyft driver for years. So like my skills were like talking to people, which I was good at, but I had no ability to sell anything. And sales, if you don't have sales, you don't have a product. So
fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, you have to learn those skills. And if I hadn't taken those steps back, it's very likely I would probably have just gone into music teaching as a private solo teacher and then never developed anything around that. And I would just be doing my own sort of studio, which is fine. And I still love the teaching. But after doing this, it's like, oh man, now I don't see a world where I could just go back. It's like, and anything I do from here on out is like, well, I'm going to have side projects.
Multi-passionate, right? That's kind of the buzzword these days. Well, I think it's important to touch on the fact that most musicians are. Like, I think that's a pretty common theme. Like, I'm sure anyone who's listening to this is probably listening for the same reason. Like, they have other interests. They're not just trying to do whatever they're doing right now. And they're exploring options and opportunities in their career. If we're looking down that rabbit hole and trying to figure out what to do next, it can feel overwhelming, and also don't feel like you have to just do where you find, like, go where you find the opportunity. Like, it seems like what you guys have done in your past products and even with the original Muzie is like, we're not necessarily looking for a quick fix. We're not trying to be like the thing that solves everyone's problems. We see a need and we're really excited about it. Like, it's also fun. We're passionate about it, not just like, I'm plugging this hole. It's, more of a passion project than anything else. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
feel like if it was a plugging the hole kind of operation, you'd burn out so fast it wouldn't even be funny. It's this job is relentless. Like, the real truth of it is 15-hour work days. I mean, that people tell you that. I saw a great clip the other day. I don't know, it was some famous rich person, and basically they were like, I love when young kids come to me and they're like, I want to own my own business so I can set my own hours. That is the most incorrect way to think about running especially like a tech startup or something. Is you don't get to set your hours. They dictate your hours to you. If someone needs you at midnight and you don't have employees to fill that gap, you get up at midnight. The amount of times, especially through the first year of Muzie, I was up literally 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. doing calls for people in Australia. And because I just had to, there was nobody else that could do the job. So, and you miss every holiday, you miss every personal interaction, every single dinner I've gone out with my partner Mackenzie, I have ruined by having my phone and answering emails and support and doing work at dinner. And still to this day, it's still there. There's it's like I think like a misconception that once you kind of grow a thing, you get to like step back and not do. It gets harder and harder. The more people you fold in, the more responsibility you have. The second you hire somebody else, it's your responsibility to make sure they eat.
Yes.
It's now you are in charge of their family. It's like, and your family. It's so much more stress. But there is something very, very rewarding about it. There's the constant, and I love the constant work. I'm not the kind of person who can stop. So I almost get annoyed on the days where I'm like, what should I do today? Like, is anything happening? Like, I get so confused when I don't have a stacked schedule. And those days I end up floundering around and really not doing anything productive.
We call that slothing around here. Like, it's a Sunday and I have no work to do and I don't understand, so I'm just going to lay on the couch for 5 hours. I don't really know what else to do with my life.
I just recently started getting into this game on my iPad, and I bought an Xbox controller so I can play the game on my iPad. And I was like, I've got my whole little setup. I've never really gamed before, but I found this to be like a very therapeutic, like when I need that, like, well, nothing important seems to be going on, I'm going to go sneak over here and play for 20 minutes. And it's like, it's kind of fun, but yeah, I like the constant work. I think that's just who I am, so that's just part of my personality. I know a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with a couple of friends the other day, that they were all saying how much they love 9-to-5 jobs, which they love the fact they get their paycheck, they get to go home, and at 5, nobody gets to bother them.
Yeah.
Where for me, that sounds like the worst thing in the world, because I, for some reason, must be a masochist and love the idea of people bugging me at 10 o'clock at night. Like, I just like that constant sort of push. So yeah, it's definitely a personality trait to be able to run these kinds of things. But it's a lot of work, but it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it is fun. I definitely wouldn't be doing it if I didn't actually really like it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Are there, as the company's grown and you guys have built your team and everything, I do think a natural progression is like, yes, obviously the responsibility grows and the stress in a lot of ways can grow. So it's not like we get to slack off or have more free time or anything. But are there maybe boundaries that you've set in your work-life balance, or like things that you found to be really helpful for you to manage all of that stress that you're working through?
Yeah, there's the famous learning to say no. It's I did this yesterday. Sorry to if you're watching. You're gonna find out exactly what I lied. I wasn't out. I was at home. I was in front of a computer. But basically someone was asking, "Can you meet right now?" And the answer was no. It's 7 o'clock in the evening. I'm putting together a TV in the other room, trying to like hang it on the wall. Yeah, they needed some help. I still provide the help as much as I can through email and chat and whatever. But I shouldn't have to be on call like that. So
No.
those are kinds of the things I've started to be a little bit more. I used to say yes to anything. I
Yeah.
mean, like you could call me in the middle of the night and I would have gotten out of bed and I would have got dressed, put on a thing, and done a whole presentation for you. And I have done that many times. And at a certain point,
Yep.
you just have to accept that from 10:30 p.m. to 5 a.m., you don't get to bother me. And that's not a big window. Like that's a really small window of time that I'm giving to myself. It's quite literally how long I sleep. But to me, I used to literally ruin my own sleep to work, and it became such a problem that I was like physically
Yeah.
drained, physically done. I couldn't wake up properly. I was in a terrible mood all the time, and I couldn't figure out why. It's like
because the brain capacity at that point is so diminished that you can't put the pieces together.
yeah, exactly. You're already so out of it. You
I don't know what the
why
problem is.
And so, those things I think and I should have put those rules in place way earlier. I don't think I needed to expand the team even before I should have started enacting some of those policies. But for me, I just figured and thought that I had to do everything all the time. And if I pissed off one person, then that was a failure to me. And they say, don't take your business personally. That's a lie. You will take it so personally because you should. It's your thing. If you don't take it personally, then why are you doing it? So yeah, it's much more. You're much more involved than you think you are. Um, but yeah, I think putting boundaries up is crucial. I mean, and teachers, it's the same thing with my own lessons. I had to learn to say no makeup lessons. I had to learn to say no refunds. I had to teach myself all of that stuff because I was the pushover who was, oh, I'm so sorry you can't make it. Here's your $20 back. And let's reschedule for tomorrow, even though it's completely inconvenient for me. And it's like you bend over backwards so much. And then you realize they're just walking over you because they've realized you're a pushover. And you don't think of yourself as a pushover. You think of yourself as accommodating.
I'm like, this is great customer service. I'm really helping them. And in reality, like, I'm getting got every single step of the way. Right?
Yeah. And first is you think you're doing something good. Like you think you're actually helping, but you're really creating your own problem.
Yes.
And at a certain point, you're the only one that can pull you out of that rut. And you just have to have a real conversation with yourself. Are you comfortable losing a couple students? If not, then keep working until your eyes bleed. But you should be. You should be okay losing the ones that are abusing you and go and find the ones that don't want to abuse you and actually appreciate you. And I've even found, if I used to do demos for as long as the person needed it. And those could go on for hours.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where it's like in demos for an hour and a half sometimes. And then I realized that it was really a coaching call. Like the first half was a demo, but then it turned into this whole like
now
thing
we're just
where
talking about everything you're running into issues with, and like I'm just solving all your problems for you, which is great.
But maybe I should get paid for my time. It's like, and then I actually did put out a coaching program. So I can be like, hey, if you want this, it's over here. And that has drastically cut down sort of the overuse of my time.
Yeah.
And that because we're still a small company in this perspective of how many users we have. There's tens of thousands of people on Muzie, and there's a handful of us. And so the ratio is insane. It's thousands to one. But we've kind of got it down now where we can do that. But I think people sometimes misunderstand that. They're like, oh, there's only a few people here. We make it look like that so that you don't feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But really, there's thousands of them and a few of us, and we've just got to juggle until it, to make it work. But a few years in, it's working.
You were talking about the rooting like holidays and everything, and I had this like very vivid flashback to a Thanksgiving when I was in graduate school. And one of my students' parents on Thanksgiving at like 8:00 at night, I was settling with my family. I think we were going to watch Elf or something.
Yep.
Tried to FaceTime me. to
Yeah.
show me that the student was playing for their family. First of all, I've heard that piece every single week for the last 8 weeks. Thank you.
I don't care anymore.
I know it sounds good. Thank you. And also, like, it's Thanksgiving. Like, leave me alone, kindly, professionally.
Yeah.
No, please stop.
Yeah.
That was my like clear wake up call. Like, oh my God, I have to put boundaries in place. Like, I've been way too nice to people. That this is this is literally a decision that they thought was a good idea. Like, they sat there and like, you know who would love to see this right now? Kelly. Like, we should FaceTime her into our family Thanksgiving. She's not with her own family.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's just because people think even your single teacher studio, but people treat you like in a corporate entity that's got like some reserved soldiers that can come and do some work for this. Like, that's not how it works.
Until that's inconvenient. And they're like, oh, but you're just one person and don't you really, really need us to stay? Don't you want to do every single thing we ask of you? Like, and then they'll flip it back around on you, which is always frustrating too.
Yes, very much. I was actually just dealing with that recently. I think I might have told you this. I had a student who was taking 4 lessons a week. And so I gave them a discount because it was a crazy amount of payment for each month. A few months later, 3 lessons a week. A few months later, 2 lessons a week. And then all of a sudden it's 1 lesson a week and they're still getting this crazy discount. And you're like, well, hold on, I have to up you to the real charge rate. And they're like, well, no, why would I do that? Because I've been getting... And you're like, well, hold on. You're like,
because that was a discount and you're paying 400% of your current tuition.
Exactly. So I was cool with limiting that a little, but not now I'm losing money. It's like, and I eventually have to, I had to actually fire that student eventually because it just got too much. Where's my makeup lesson? I'm not paying for this. I'm not doing that. And it's like, well, you're on auto debit, so I already have the money, but yeah, it just became too much, and you have to put you have to put up your boundaries, and it is very difficult.
It is, especially because I think when I'll put myself in a teacher's shoes, right? They're working bizarre hours, and they're teaching from 2 to 8 in the evening, and then when they're done, they're still maybe in that work mode, and that's when they're coming to you and asking for questions and asking help and things. But they might be 9 p.m. Eastern, or let's say 9 p.m. Pacific, and that's 10 p.m. your time, and you're settling in for bed, and it's just kind of this weird cycle that we're in. At the same time, they're expecting an immediate response from you. At the same time, when their students come to them and say, I need that makeup lesson, or I need you to call me right now, they're frustrated.
Yes.
And it's such an interesting mindset that we all fall into. Like, I'm not saying this is like anyone's fault.
We're all guilty.
We all do it. Like, when I ask for something from a service provider that I'm paying for education for or something else, of course I'm going to want more flexibility than they're willing to provide me. And they have to set their boundaries with me. Likewise, I do that with my clients, with my students. It is a really weird cycle, but finding those boundaries for yourself is really important.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it there, which is, and like, I teach, you teach, like, we're not, talking bad about teachers.
No.
We are guilty of this. But I do get a little ironic sometimes. Sometimes how even teachers will talk to me or talk to my team through the chat support.
Yeah.
And it'll be very like rude. And you're like, imagine if your student spoke to you like this. What would you say to them?
Yeah.
You'd tell them to get lost. I can't do that.
Or you'd be in one of the music teacher Facebook groups screenshotting and complaining about it.
Exactly.
which we all do again. Like, that's not a bad thing or anything. But we all do it.
I'm guilty. Like, I ran the chat support music. I still am actively on there, but like, I ran that thing for years alone. I am so guilty of going to chat supports and being like, hello, hurry up. Like, I'm annoyed now. Like, it's like, and I have to stop for a second and be like, it's actually probably just a real person on the other side who's getting a cup of coffee and is on the computer right now. Like,
he's got 18 chat windows open and I'm number 18, so I just gotta wait a second.
And I think people sort of always overestimate the capability and the size of companies too. Like, any company, you look at them, you're like, oh, they probably got like 50 employees back there. It's like, do the math real quick. 50 people at 50 grand a piece. You're like, we're looking at millions of dollars.
You pay $10 a month, my guy. Where do you think that's happening?
And actually, that's kind of the funny one that, like, I get a little bit chuckle out. Like, Muzi's $24 a month because that's the national or the international average half an hour lesson. So $24 is the average from globally of what a 30-minute lesson should cost. We charge that for the whole month. The amount of teachers who will be like, oh, well, it's more expensive than Zoom. Why is that? Like, well, we don't have 84 billion customers, so we don't get the luxury of scale. And actually, this should probably be about $200 a month, but you wouldn't pay that. So
Yep.
we can't
So we have to
that.
go do the scale ourselves. Yeah.
So we have
It's
to
a hard place to
ourselves.
be. And then when you're getting feature requests and things too, like, I don't know. I think maybe the point of this whole conversation for anyone listening is like, you get those requests that really irk you. And
Yeah.
when you get them, like, you have to take a breath and you have to handle it with a smile on your face and provide your great customer service so that you can maintain your business or your work or your product, whatever it is that you're working on, right? We even have to do it sometimes in family. Like, someone will say something, you're like, gotta take a breath, and then I can respond.
I'm gonna walk away.
Right. And I think it's so helpful, whether it's, a software that you're subscribing to or a service that you're using, or, your own private lesson teacher if you're still studying yourself. Just remembering that, like, they also have those reactions and those thoughts and those feelings. And so when we come in hot, we have to remember that they also need to take a breath, and they're also going to have to process that and respond to it with their best customer service. And, if we're all a little nicer to each other, right? Like,
it goes a long way.
Be kind, everybody.
But it does go a long way if it's just, and we understand, like, you're only ever coming to a chat support when you're frustrated. You're only ever
You're not coming to leave praises. Yeah.
You're texting your teacher in the middle of the evening because you're frustrated about something, or something not working right, or something, the lesson time is wrong, or whatever. Like, it's not usually to be like, you're the best teacher I've ever had, I love you so much. Like,
Happy Thanksgiving.
That's not the texts we get. Like, I'm sure every teacher right now listening to this is cracking up because they're like, yeah, I've never received a thank you text. But I've gotten a list of angry, like, annoyed, frustrated, and at the end of the day, we are all customer service. Any kind of business where you're teaching or you're providing a service, you're customers and you're the service. So you've got to do it. But it can be, if you're not careful, it can be the thing that drains you and really ruins everything for you. And it's usually only the minority. I mean, almost always. It's the 2 or 3 people who are constantly kind of getting under your skin, not the 17 or 25 other kids you've got who are fantastic, who show up on time, pay every week. And, and that's where I was saying earlier, like, at a certain point, you have to have the confidence in yourself as a business, as a person, as a provider, whatever it is you're doing, to say, I don't need your business. And not in a rude way, but in a confident, because I can go find it over here where I will be happier and these customers will appreciate it. Yeah. And, there's a lot of talk about, like, the perfect client. And I don't know if the perfect client exists, but you should be looking for those types of people anyway. Like, you should still kind of pursue that path because you're much more likely to find them if you do follow that way, instead of just throwing out, say, welcome anybody who wants to, $5 lessons, come one, come all. It's like, you'll burn yourself out trying to do that. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I said earlier today on a session with a client was, she's in a really high point right now. Like, her studio is going really well and we're all excited about it. And I said, this is the time to create a nice file. Like, start going in and screenshot testimonials and nice text messages. And, she's going into schools right now and she got some great feedback from a band director. I'm like, write that down. Even if they didn't send to you, like, write down the quote as you remember it and attribute it. And keep a note on your phone or a folder on your computer with all of the nice things people have said to you. Because in the next month, you're going to have a day where it all goes to hell in a handbasket and you're miserable again. And I wish that wasn't the case. And I don't mean to do that to like say it to bring you down to reality or anything, but it will happen at some point. And when it does, you just want to be prepared, because I kind of picture, like, this tolerance is like when we first start a business, we have like a little saucer, and then over time it kind of grows, and it might be a cereal bowl, then a mixing bowl, and that might be a huge vat of tolerance. So it used to be you bottom out every time that something negative happens. Now you're just skimming off the top. But part of that skimming off the top is having your nice file and, like, remembering why you do what you do, so the bad things don't totally derail you or take the whole day away from you or anything.
I literally have a nice file. No joke. Like, I genuinely have one. I
Good.
have an entire folder that is screenshots of comments on Facebook or on wherever I've seen them, of people being like, "Oh, it's the best platform. Oh, they're the greatest team. Oh, it's whatever the nice thing they said."
Even behind your back, which is amazing. I mean, you guys get a
Oh, yeah,
ton of testimonials where people just comment and you're not even remotely involved, which
yeah,
is
those are
so
the
cool.
coolest. Yeah, because those are the ones where it's like, sometimes people send them to, like, somebody else will send it to me. They're like, "Hey, I saw this in a group," and it'll be a screenshot of some person I have no idea who they are. I'm
That's
like,
so
they
cool.
must use Muzi. And it's funny. I used to have this perception where I knew everyone who was using the platform. Literally can't make sense because you can't know more than a couple hundred names or faces. So there's literally thousands of them. So there's no way I actually could know it. But I always had this like illusion that I was like
We're all best
really
friends.
well.
We all know each
Yeah,
other.
like I knew everyone. I knew what everyone was doing. Reality is not at all. There's like 20 that I can probably actually tell you what they're doing, and the rest of them just use the product and go tell their friends, and like,
Yeah.
and that's a really neat thing. And I think that was sort of like a little when the imposter syndrome stuff starts kind of coming in too, because you're like, oh, now these strangers are talking about me. Like actually, the other day I
Yeah.
googled my own name, and just every so often, just to make sure there's nothing terrible at the top.
Fair enough.
And I found like 2 or 3 things I'd never seen before that were like YouTube videos of people talking about the product, or things that like I even found an interview I did years ago that I didn't even know I'd done. So stuff like that is good, right? But it's neat to see the like it's grown beyond us. Like it's now not me telling people to go and try music. It's people coming to the platform and telling me that their friend told them to try it, or somebody else, or they saw it on a podcast or something like that. And that's really cool.
That's
That's
awesome.
kind of the surreal, like, oh wow, this is bigger than me now. It's weird.
Imposter syndrome, but also you just feel it's not even imposter syndrome. Like you just feel so small all of
Yeah.
a sudden. Like all these people know who I am and know that I exist, and I don't know that they exist. Like I was on a
Yeah.
TikTok live the other day, and someone chimed in and was like leaving comments and questions. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Australia. I love your content." I'm like,
Oh yeah, you're like, cool, we made it to
nice to
Australia.
meet you. Like that's
Yeah.
wild, but it's such a wild ride. And I want to commend you, and I think you do such a good job of being a positive, friendly face in the music community, and like being a part of Facebook groups and answering questions and chiming in on things, and reflecting everything we just talked about, like just being a kind person and being helpful. You reflect all of that so frequently and so regularly that, I mean, obviously people are attracted to the company and to you, and now it's growing to the point where people maybe even sign up and they don't even know that it
Yeah.
is you on the other side, but they're just signing up because they heard the product is awesome, and that's so cool.
Yeah, no,
That's so
and for
cool.
me, I think that was like that was probably the moment when we started seeing, for us, I think it was when we started seeing countries pop up on the map that we're like,
Oh
we've
yeah.
never done anything in Nigeria, and now there's 10 schools in Nigeria using it. Like,
That's
how did that
wild.
happen? And then you sort of go through and you find that, like, literally there was a guy online who saw a post and he told a couple friends, and before I know it, we are now the central platform in this town in Nigeria. It's like, that's weird, but
wild.
that's wicked cool.
Yeah.
It's like that is like, and then when you start seeing like the numbers, not just users and things, but like how many lessons have been conducted, how many students have been helped, and it's in the hundreds of thousands. It starts to boggle your mind because it's like, I never thought, like, I thought we were going to help some teachers, like, because when the pandemic, we were just scrambling, so
Yeah.
we just thought we were helping as much as we could, and then to see it actually become sort of a staple of people's education. I think actually the moment that I knew Muzi was sort of bigger than me was we got a photograph sent to us from a teacher, and it was a student's notebook, and on the notebook they had put the Muzi logo all over the notebook because to them that was music lessons. And their Muzi notebook was this was their like physical version of their digital like product.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it was like a little kid who had done it. He'd like hand drawn the logo over and over again. And it's like that one hit me hard because it was
I love
like
kids.
Right? It's like they don't even understand how much that could possibly mean to me. It's like that's the accolade of the century there, because it's like I used to have the whole like I want to be on Forbes 30 under 30. I want to be a rock star. I want to all these things, and it's like you start to grow up. You're like, I want that little kid to have had a good experience in his lesson. If that occurs, that's the world. And, it's when you start seeing it over and over again, it's weird still, but it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got very lucky.
That is awesome. Sam, it's been so fun talking today and exploring your career journey and how this all came to be and what you guys are working on. Oh my gosh. Hey, final kind of wrap up question. I mean, obviously you guys don't have to share anything major secret or anything, but what do you guys have coming down the pipeline at Muzie? What are you most excited about right now, or what projects are you guys working on?
Yeah. It's actually kind of cool where because of Tonara closing down we inadvertently kind of prepared for that. Over the summer, we had built a whole bunch of new practice tools.
Oh, that's cool.
And then we launched them all on September 1st. And then literally 3 days later, we found out Tonara was going to go out. So we've had a lot of Tonara users move over to Muzie. So we're heavy in the practice side of things right now.
That's awesome.
So building more practice. We had actually intended to sort of pivot. We'd spent all summer on practice stuff, and we were going to go and work on some just bigger back end tools. And then we're like, well, let's keep digging down this road for a little bit longer. So from now to the end of the year, we've got tons of more practice tools coming out. So anyone who was on Tonara will have literally everything that they used to have.
That's awesome.
And more. And then the big secret project, and this is technically a secret project, is our resource center.
Ooh.
And this is the thing that I'm the most sort of amped about, because this is the first time my rule is if it helps you teach or it helps you learn, then we'll build or we'll look at it at least. And this almost breaks my rule, but not quite, because the idea is we're going to partner with content creators, course providers, other software companies, publishing companies, podcasts, anything that is the continued education of a teacher is going to be provided inside the platform. So you'll have access to people like you, that, courses and things that provide the extra learning that you don't normally get once you leave college.
Oh, yeah.
There's too much emptiness once you get out of school.
And even maybe sometimes in school, but that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day.
We'll go down that rabbit hole for sure. Absolutely. So when they come out the other end, there's a lot of oh no, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And it's if we can give you a solution that's here's how you teach, here's where you teach, here's how here's literally the whole environment of your education. So you can continue your education, the students can continue their education. I think that's sort of what Muzie is, and really where we've kind of been going with this from day one.
That's awesome.
And now we're at a point where there's other companies and other people that want to get folded in with us. So it's a really exciting opportunity and sort of an excuse for me to go and knock on doors that I've always wanted to and never really been confident to. So it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure. But should be pretty
awesome.
fun.
Yeah, and remember, it was a secret project, everyone, so don't say anything. Our little secret. Oh, that's awesome. Sam, I'm so excited for you guys, and I really appreciate you sharing so much today and going down plenty of rabbit holes with me, but this has been so much fun. Obviously, everyone listening, I highly recommend that you check out Muzie. Super, super cool program. Sam is obviously a wonderful human. He and his dad are doing great work, so check it out.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you having me. It's been a blast. I love these kinds of things.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.